All right. So, welcome everyone to our book club. For those of you that are new, I started this book club because I enjoy reading, and hardly do I ever have a chance to talk about the literature that I'm reading. And since I'm on the spiritual path, I decided to create a book club about spiritual books and divine awakening, spiritual awakenings, and all that good stuff. And so I'm so honored to share this space. And for those of you watching the recording, I would love to hear your feedback as well. Today, we are honored with our author, Mariya, who wrote The Rose Codes, this beautiful book. And I know I've learned so much from it. And so I want to start off by asking, and if all of you have some questions, you'll have a chance to kind of sprinkle in your questions along the way as well. But I absolutely loved your forward, everything from book cover to book cover, Mariya. But in here, you describe this book as being a demand by spirit. Can you tell us a little bit about that experience and kind of how that poured out of you and why you think we're ready for this now?
Mm. Well, great questions. So I am very in touch with my spirit guides. So they're very intentional when they give me a commission. Um, all of my books that I'm going to write are going to be commission based, meaning spirit just comes in and I usually refer to my guides as they, and they tell me what's meant to be birthed. And so this for me very much is a closing of like a major karmic loop personally, because I have been involved with the Order of the Rose in past lives. And so because of that, when my guides came through and they were talking to me about my next book, a lot of it felt like a coming home, like a comeback. I attempted to write something similar in one of my past lives, and I never finished. Never completed the book. And so I was back at it again. The interesting part is this is supposed to be at least a trilogy. So there are two more after this and
Ooh.
maybe a fourth. I know, which is really funny because so when I sit down to write, and it's less writing, more channeling, really, I don't really know much. So I know the name of the book. I know the outline because they straight up dictated. They're like, this is the outline, this is the name of chapters. And then you have to surrender. So I had to surrender. And part of the reason why is because when spirit gives you something, they don't give it to you start to finish. They give it to you in random order. And so what started coming through was first I started writing this heart spaces, like the in between little poetic parts, I guess. And I'm like, okay, well, I'm not sure what they're all about. And so I just wrote them down. Then all of a sudden, like a big chapter comes through and it's a completely different tone of voice. And I'm like, okay, I'm not sure how the two could even exist in the same book. Like there I have my poetic verses over here, or like stories from the past about like a goddess or something. And over here I have like very, not dry, but like very serious, like spiritual knowledge that wants to come through. I personally did not really know how the two would coexist. And so part of like receiving this book for me was really just surrendering to the flow and to the fact that I have to get really comfortable with not knowing, because it made no sense for the first maybe 100 pages that I wrote. It like made no sense. It was like from the beginning, from the middle, from the end, from everywhere in between. I think I only started really understanding it about halfway through. I know I'm probably not answering your question now that
No,
I'm
you
like
are.
just
You are in so many different ways. Keep
okay.
going.
Okay. Yeah, so it was very much yeah, so like a part of it was not resisting. And then the other concern that I had was just how big the book is. Like I'm like okay, spirit, thank you for, being so generous with what you're dictating and like letting me touch and channel. But this is getting long. And I'm like, I'm not sure anybody wants this long. And they're like, oh, Mariya, don't worry. Like, don't worry about it. It's not up to you. And then they're like, don't worry, there are three more coming after this. I'm like, oh my God, okay. So that's kind of how it is. It's really a story of surrender, but also knowing it's actually with this book in particular. I didn't really have it with my first, with the 72 keys. I had it with this much, with this one. You cannot write certain chapters unless you pass certain initiations, just because you cannot, like, your frequency needs to be of a certain caliber. And until I closed my own stuff that I was working through, they wouldn't dictate a chapter. They wouldn't allow me to download the chapter. And that's why it took me quite a while to write it, because prior to being able to like write these practices, I had to do my own homecoming to the Divine Mother and like releasing all of the stuff I had to release, and then healing the heart and all of that good stuff, and coming back to nature. And it was really, it felt like a lot of trials and tribulations and rites of passages before downloading each chapter. Like the chapter with the water, we had our entire house flooded with a hurricane. I live in Florida. It was this area, this house is where I live. It's 110 years old. The house hasn't seen water ever. Like, as in, it was in the same exact location for 110 years, never got flooded. Before I'm like, I know I'm meant to birth this water chapter, and I'm not sure what is the water initiation going to be, but our entire first floor got flooded. We had to move out of the house for 4 months because they had to do renovations. It was bad. Like the entire, like it was crazy. Like, we had to throw away all of the furniture that was here
Oh, wow.
because the water just took it over. So it's that kind of book, it takes you for a ride.
It
Yeah.
really is. And I think even as a reader, I couldn't move forward until I did certain things. And maybe I didn't do it exactly how I did it in the book, but I'll give you a perfect example. Like, I was praying for the divine feminine, and then this book came into my life. And then you talked a lot about surrender. And I remember turning to a page one day, and there it is, a little paragraph about surrender and what that meant. And I was like, oh, what is this? Right. And then Anna all of a sudden invites me to her goddess retreat, and we're doing this water initiation. And then all of a sudden I'm able to actually read a lot of the book. It was just absolutely magical. And whatever I've prayed for and have needed, I would magically turn to that page. And I don't think you necessarily have to read it in order either. I think it's whatever you're meant to, because sometimes I would go to certain chapters and it wouldn't digest for me, and I'm like, I can't do this right now, and I would put it away, and other things would happen, and I would come back and it's like, oh, I can actually receive this now. If that makes sense. I don't know if anybody else had a similar experience that you'd like to speak to. I see Anna getting ready to unmute herself. No.
Oh man, I mean, the only thing I can, I mean, there are a couple things, but yeah, my apartment actually got flooded this year. I had to move buildings, and I'm like, Spirit, what is going on? They're like, just, you just need all this water in your life, and, slightly changing directions. And yeah, and then of course being able to step into a lot more collaborations with other women has just exploded in my life, including, doing the retreat with a group of women. And so then it's just been coming in a lot more, and working with like different female archetypes and the shadow aspects of those, and integrating that has been coming in as I've been, reading the book. And yeah, it's been incredible.
Sharing that, Anna. Anybody else have any reflections on your initial initiation into the book?
So I read the first like 3 chapters, and it actually flowed. And I think I had like a free preview or something on Kindle. I'm not positive even where I was. And I was like bummed when it was at the end. Like, this can't be the end. Like, there has to be more. But then I had other things come up in life that I was busy with, and I didn't go back to it. But I found the first part to flow quite well. I enjoyed it. I do have a question, Mariya. When you say spirit dictates it to you, so I have like a very logical mind. Like, are you doing autonomic writing? Or do you hear it, or it just comes to you when you sit down to write?
It depends. The verses I pretty much hear in my head. especially the first two sentences. And then it's like a trail, you know, like it's almost like a trail that I can feel leads a very certain place. So it's almost like they dictate like verbatim I hear in my inner hearing, like in my inner ear, what the first two lines of a poem are, or like and then, you know, like I call them heart spaces, the in between these poetic verses. And then from there, I kind of already know what's meant to come through, because it's like, so it's a combination of clear audience, clear hearing, and clear knowing is how I channel. And then it actually also depends on the chapter and like what needs to come through. Because for instance, if it is like an ascended master that needs to dictate something, I don't know, like a Mary Magdalene, or I don't know, anyone else for that matter. Sometimes before I'm meant to channel it, they come to me in my dream or in sleep, and they deposit something. Like they actually leave an object with me, or they leave something. Or sometimes wake me up in the middle of the night, and it's like just downloads of information. Like 3 or 4 a.m. And sometimes I have to take out my phone and start writing it down. Sometimes I have to take my notebook and start writing it down. So it comes in all different ways. But also before writing the book, there's this whole process of how I almost like download it into my physical body, because the codes, they come from elsewhere, like not out of this world. And so I almost have to receive them through my crown, and then they start unpacking. But really, most of it is clear knowing. But the interesting part is when I say clear knowing, it's not the same thing as just knowing everything. That's, for instance, if I was trying to write the encyclopedia, it's not the same thing as consciously knowing every single entry in the encyclopedia, but it's more like knowing where to begin, and then it just unwinds in front of you. So like a path, I guess, is how it feels. But I don't know, like I am completely unfamiliar with concepts, and I do zero research actually on anything that I write. So yeah.
Any other questions before we move on?
I was actually just going to make a comment that that the initial chapters are actually the most, call it, dry. So it's nice that you were able to get through the first 3, because I think they're the driest. And when I asked my guides, I'm like, what are you guys doing? Because I know they did a lot of thinking around how to structure the book. And I'm like, so why do you put all the fun stuff at the end? Put all the fun stuff at the beginning. It's like I'm trying to ration. I'm like, listen, I'm on the ground. I know people need the fun stuff first, otherwise they're going to check out. They're like, no, Mariya, there's a method to this madness. I'm like, okay, so tell me what the method is then. And they're saying that the initial chapters, there's a lot of sacred geometry in them. And they're saying that as you're reading the sacred geometry chapters, what happens is, through whatever you're reading, your auric field is being rewritten, like the crystalline structure of it is being rewritten and upgraded, so you can receive everything else that's fun afterwards. But if we did it the reverse, it wouldn't happen. So, you know, Spirit believes that, you know, people need to be almost like prepared. And so the sacred geometry chapters at the beginning are that preparation for the aura to be able to receive the practices and everything. And I'm like, okay, I'm not, you know, I'm in surrender. If that's how you guys want to do it, that's how you want to do it, that's fine.
That's really interesting, because I did try to move on to the other chapters, and I kept being pushed back to the first few chapters. And I'm like, okay, I have to get through the first few chapters and see if the rest clicks. But it wasn't because it wasn't clicking. It was because that's just how I was pushed, like back and forth between the chapters. I thought that was really interesting. So thank you for presencing that.
Yeah. But at the same time, Jazzy, I also think that the way that you're doing it, kind of like opening it up on different pages, I think that's another way of doing it also. I don't think you need to read it front to.
Yeah, because it was whatever I needed for that day, or whatever prayer I had. I was like, oh, there's a chapter on that. I didn't think there would be a chapter on that in this book. And it was really helpful. I really loved it. Thank you. I want to talk a little bit about the alchemical rose chapter, because that to me was one of the most fascinating chapters because I've always connected with the rose. Even before I got into the woo stuff, rose was my favorite flower. You always think about the red rose as romance and passion, but the way that you divided it up into these 5 stages of,
Mhm.
the black rose, the white rose, the rainbow rose. I really felt like I saw myself through this timeline of like, whoa, this is really how I have moved through life, and sometimes I'm in all the stages, and sometimes I'm really focused on one stage. Can you talk a little bit about how this transpired for you, and then while you were writing it, and also how it transpired in your own life?
Well, I think on the spiritual path, we always go through cycles of death and rebirth. And I think the phoenix cycle, they also call it, meaning an old part of us wants to die out and a new part of us wants to come through. I think this, the alchemical rose chapter is like another version of that. So in mystery schools of the old, they would, in spiritual schools, mystery schools, they would architect the death rebirth cycle. It happens to a lot of us naturally at our own pace, right? But different people are on different trajectories. And so for some people, you may have just a couple of death rebirth cycles in your entire life. For some people may have a death rebirth cycle every other week. Like it all depends on your own pacing and what your higher self wanted for you. And so in mystery schools, because obviously there was a curriculum and there was a community, they always wanted for people to kind of be on the same wavelength. And so they would go through these processes that would almost put everybody on this death rebirth cycle trajectory. And one of those was the rose path. And so, it is an alchemical path. I was very connected to alchemy. Not to say that every alchemist did it, not at all, because the traditional kind of, this was an offshoot of alchemy, not necessarily the majority of what transpired. And so essentially this path from the black rose through the white, the rainbow, the red, and the golden, it's all about how do you get initiated into something, like into the mystery. And people used to do that together, right? Like you would set out day one on the first rose and end up however many weeks later with the last rose. And that again prompted people into the death and rebirth. And every time you die and are reborn, spiritually speaking, you get access to more knowledge, more light, more love, more everything, right? So again, I think that's how kind of like it transpired for me. I have been through many of these cycles through the writing of this book. Red rose, you're right. It is very different from how I think we're used to thinking about it. Yes, it does represent love, but it also represents things like sacrifice, for instance, which was actually very much Mary Magdalene, and passion, which is very Mary Magdalene, and not passion just in the romantic sense, passion for life, passion for change. And Mary Magdalene was certainly a revolutionary. She did have a mystery school of her own, and at its height, it had 10,000 members. So 10,000 women were following her and into her footsteps. So she did accomplish a lot. And so they actually used this process as well there to go through initiations with the women that wanted to become priestesses. But it's also a process of purification, and it does take the 5 alchemical phases and uses that as a guiding post, so to say, on how do you go through transformation? How do you begin? Where do you begin? What are the questions? What are the things you should think about? What are the rituals, etc. So that's really the alchemical rose path.
So when you make the comment about Mary Magdalene teaching 10,000, is that something you read somewhere, or was that part of the channeled information?
I remember. That is actually a past life memory.
Okay, wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Thank
Did
you.
that have anything to do with the Essenes?
She was definitely a part of the Essenes, but that was when they left the community already.
Okay.
That was after Jesus's death.
Right.
Yeah, they were in Europe already at the time,
Okay.
like
I
in
was going to
France.
say, did she go to France and UK?
Yeah, yeah, that is during the later stage in her life.
Right.
Awesome. So in the same way, can you tell us a little bit of, the impact on the Venusian rose? Because that one to me was even, I have a lot of like blocks with my sacral. So,
Hmm.
so that one was very, transpiring for me. I'm very curious as to like your thoughts, any additional thoughts on the Venusian rose.
Was there anything in particular around like the 5 petal path? Is that what you're curious about?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a similar, it's not dissimilar to what we just described with alchemical rose. I think the intention of guides was to really recommend multiple pathways people could use to further their own spiritual development. And when you pick a path to follow, it's really about personal resonance, right? Some people just really resonate with the energy of Venus for whatever reason. Could be past incarnations, could be what Venus represents energetically. And that would mean that if essentially you pick Venus as your teacher, you would want to walk the path of Venus. If you resonate with Rose more, you can walk the path of the Rose. But there are so many initiatory paths, and some of them we kind of booted off to the fourth book, because there is the path of the raven, there is the path of the star, there is the path of the moon. There are so many initiation paths, but all of them essentially, they're, all of these paths are really for someone to go on their own hero's journey, if that makes sense, a heroine's journey, starting where they are, and having almost like an end game or like an intention for that path, like whatever that intention may be, right? For some people, it could be, okay, like they want to further their spiritual skills, like, have a deeper awakening, or they want more happiness in their life, or they want to find a partner. Like it really, there's a range of like what you could desire. All of these paths can take you there, right? Via this spiritual sequence of events. Once you step on the path, including this Venusian path, you surrender to, well, A, your spirit team. B, in case of Venus, you surrender to the essence of planet Venus. And it's actually up to Venus to then orchestrate a large part of your journey. So Venus then essentially becomes your mentor, and you become the mentee. So once you actually do the ritual, she will almost take you on a ride, and things will be happening in your life that you think like, oh, just events, and they're not connected to me walking the path. But no, everything from the day that you pledge yourself to the path is connected to the mentor that you chose, or the path that you chose, until the path ends and you go through the end of the cycle and get what your intention was.
That makes sense. I feel like a lot of this comes in, even like once you make the decision that you're going to dive into this book, stuff just starts kind of coming into your path, because like I said before, I would open up the book and it's like, oh my God, I just went through this, or this is what I'm asking about. So it's really interesting how activating this book is.
Well, it's actually when I sat down to write, because this was such a demand, right, from spirit, it was pretty much told to me flat out that there were a lot of guides on the other side that are committed to working with the people through this book and through this medium. So it was my job to kind of just download it and like let it, out, like just publish it, so to say. And it's almost like it's their job to invite people into the book. And so nobody's here randomly, because this is like a big, like the odds of this happening randomly are, non-existent. So everybody received some pull from this, great women that walk the path of the rose in some shape or form. And what happens usually is they work through the book with you and on your auric fields, etc. Because they see your path, they see what you need right now. And so yes, they actually promised me that they would stay very active on the other side. And that means that, yes, through the book, miracles can happen, but it's not because, it has nothing to do with me and everything to do with the spirit guides on the other side that are working through this medium.
Beautiful. Yeah, I mean, there's even a couple of women that I didn't even know, but Anna knows them, and she said, "Oh, they've read the book too." And so it's been really incredible to hear how many people that I've come across that also have this book and are on like a similar journey. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Very beautiful. Does anybody have any questions or any enlightening moments or stories that you would like to share with Mariya? Or even your experience with the book?
I just want to hop in for a second. I only read I listened to the first chapter and I got to the activation part of it, and I listen when I'm driving.
Yeah.
And so I had to stop. It was
Yeah.
like, I got this, stop now. Do not do this while you're driving.
Yeah.
And I have not been led back to it, but I have been going through a whole lot of changes in the last few months anyway. So I think for me, this is really good because I'm going, oh, now I really want to read it. And that tells me that this is probably the time to go back and give it another go. But I was fascinated by it, but I got such a hard stop.
Mhm.
And I think it was because I was listening to it and I wasn't, sitting in my meditation chair ready to dive into that stuff. But so I'm looking forward to it. I will wait for the call, but I know it's coming really soon. So so I'm really appreciating the conversation here.
Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, it's definitely not recommended to do these meditations while driving.
It's so interesting because I always choose to listen to the books. And this time around, I did not buy the Audible. I bought the hard copy. So that was an interesting shift for me. So I'm wondering, because I also listen to Audible while I drive.
Jazzy, I did the opposite. Normally, I need to have the physical book in hand, and this time I had a free Audible credit, so I used it. But I think I learned about myself that I need the physical thing in my hand. I don't know why, but I need the physical thing. I thought that, just the audible, like hearing it would help, but it's almost like I needed more moments for pause and reflection in it. And I found myself, I didn't finish it. And now I'm even more like curious to finish it now. But I think I am going to purchase the book actually, so I can go at a slower pace for me. But I did listen twice. Like my body listened twice to some of the sacred geometry stuff in the beginning. It really liked it. So yeah, like I went back twice for the sacred geometry.
That's
And
fantastic.
yeah, I used to be quite into math a lot, and I have since gone the other direction and just all dance and art and yada yada. But yeah, having that geometry piece come back in is exciting for me. So yeah, I'm just really thankful that you're here with us today. Thank you so much. And also, I just want to say it's cool to hear your process of how you channeled the book. Also, because I want to get curious about channeling. So thank you.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. And thank you for all the feedback. And thanks for having me.
It's funny. I'm very old school, and I normally want to read with physical copy. Listening to this, it's in my head. Go back and reread the first 3, and then do the Audible for the rest. So I've been resisting the Audible. I don't know why. In general, all books, and lately I've been focused on sound and frequency. So I think it's part of like the lesson of listening, So I'm going to give that a whirl.
Yeah, I initially, I was led to record an audiobook because it has so many there are so many meditations in the book. And I know like some of the meditations that I have are like 20 steps long or something. And like, there's just no way somebody could memorize it. And it's so annoying to have like a physical copy and be like, okay, what's step number 7? Okay, close my eyes, do step number 7. And it's like the start and stop. And I'm like, okay, well, if somebody, you know, if people were guided at least through an audio, it would be very, very helpful. So hence the audiobook. But yes, different people I feel like different formats. Really does depend.
And I never listened to books until I started listening to channeled books. I never absorbed anything I heard, but if I listen to channeled books, it's far more impactful on me than my logical mind trying to parse all the words. So that's just how I started just in the last 6 months or so. And I do that a lot now.
Yeah.
Mariya, if there's one thing that you would want somebody to walk away with when reading your book, what is that one thing?
That we all share one mother, the Divine Mother, and she's the one that loved us first. She's the one that loved us best, that we're all going to come back to her, well, once we leave this incarnation. But we don't have to wait this long to reconnect with her, because there's so much that her energies can do for us while we're still embodied. And this is such a special time for women, because we are all collectively coming into our own innate abilities and innate powers. And when I say powers, I don't mean it in a masculine way, like let's take over the world and be feminist. It's very different. And I think once we lean into what makes us women, that is when the world is going to start to shift, because the world is a very hard place. It is a very sad place sometimes with all the happenings. And it's, you know, I wish I could say that everything is going to get better tomorrow, but it won't, right? It's going to be a very gradual process, and it starts within for each and every one of us. And for me, the energies of this great divine feminine goddess spirit, the female feminine face of source, her energies have been incredibly healing. I actually think that regardless of what kind of relationship you had with your earthly mother, and a lot of us haven't had such an easy relationship with our earthly mother, because our own mothers could only love us to the degree that their mothers loved them. But love on planet Earth has been broken for generations, for millennia. And so, you know, if we can just go up and receive all of that infinite love, it's beautiful. And that is kind of the intention of this book, is the rise of the feminine within. So that, you know, the world is gradually and very gently shifted towards a high vibration, a much better and easier place to be.
Thank you. I received that.
I totally felt that. I feel like we're in a path, and not only for me, but for everybody, where we have to kind of open up to what's coming. And in order to help each other, we all have to be ready to receive what's coming. And in each of us has to be able to grow and accept it. And I know it's at different paces for everyone. And I think that somehow, I know Jassy kind of attracted me here. And Deborah and I were like, should we join? Should we not join? We didn't read the whole book. And I've tried, I downloaded the book, I have it in Audible, but I haven't been able to start it. And, you know, every day that I go for a walk, I'm like, what am I going to listen to today? And I went back and listened to all the podcasts that Jassy has. And I'm like, okay, I'm ready. I'm going to start the book. So I'll be ready for this book club. And I haven't, and I don't know why, because every day that I go for a walk, I have 60 minutes to listen to this book, and I haven't. And today I'm like, as I listen to what everybody is saying, I'm like, okay, I think I'm ready. I'm ready to hear whatever's coming.
Yep. I feel the exact same way. I feel like I'm really open to hearing what it is, you know. Yep, exactly.
Yeah, that's why
One
the
of
book is
the
called the Book of Initiations, right? Like you're being initiated on your own divine path.
Mhm.
And to rise up to those kinds of frequencies. Yes, sometimes there are challenges, sometimes there are delays, but we all arrive at our own perfect timing, right? It's all unfolding for us, and just the fact that you made it here, I think, is already such a big step. But yes, the book has already, like, since you download the book, it's already started working in your auric field. Make no mistake, even if you read no words in it.
I'm going to
It's just
say,
that kind of portal.
Yeah, I think
yeah.
I read the summary like 3 times, and every time I read it, I get so excited, but I just don't start it, which is, it's just sitting there ready, waiting for me to be open, I guess.
And I was going to say also, like, you asked such great questions in here, Mariya, a lot. And I say great questions with a lot of resistance because I'm just like, I feel so confronted sometimes. And I think that that's what this book does. I mean, being initiated into anything, I don't think is an easy thing. And I think you do have to work through a lot in order to move on to the next step. And it always brings me back to the very first time I met you. I remember after the podcast, I had broken down because my grandmother had passed or was passing or something. And you had said something in there that kind of pissed me off, but it was the answer. It was the answer. You had said that we all have to work on our mother wound and that we have to forgive our mothers. And I was like, okay, thank you. Bye. And I was so pissed, but I really took that to heart because after that, I started kind of my forgiveness work towards my mom. And I was like, oh my gosh, Mariya was so right, or spirit, whatever came through that day was so right. That was the answer. And as hard as that was, and as hard as it is with the relationships that we have with our mothers, or with the mother figure, or whatever, that really was the answer for me. And I think this took it even deeper because you do ask some really confronting questions that we don't want to look at, right? And so I just want to presence that.
Well, thank you for sharing that. Jazzy, as you were speaking, Spirit came through and wanted me to share something personal that I've been working on. So the work is never over. Like, I'm on my second book. I'm writing the sequel to Rose Codes right now. And that's like a whole other level because that's channeling from Sophia. So essentially from source. I'm like, okay, there we go. So it's like a whole other level of initiation for me right now. But a part of what was required for me was to do an even deeper level of healing with my own earthly mom. And my mom and I have had an interesting relationship. I think up until maybe age 15, I didn't feel like she loved me at all. So it was an interesting relationship, which I don't think is all that unique. Again, like, I know there are a lot of women that have felt the same way that I did. I just never really felt close to mom. I felt like really close to dad, like I was daddy's girl. And with mom, I was like, she was, if the best way to describe it is, if I'm fire, like a fire sign and my energy is very warm, she's ice. And like, try putting that in the same room. Like, it does not really, it's hard. And so I've been doing this healing. It's actually a very simple healing process, but also very difficult at the same time. So essentially, you buy a notebook and you write a letter to your mom in that notebook. And like, it has to be a notebook devoted specifically for that one practice and nothing else. I sat down to write a letter to mom 8 different times on 8 different occasions, about an hour each time. But you're meant to write it not from the grown-up version of you that understands why mom did certain things and has forgiven her, or at least, can rationalize why things happened the way that they happened. That is not the place you're supposed to write that letter from. You're supposed to descend into your wounded child and write that letter from that child's place and tell her exactly how it is or how it was growing up, and every single thought, and like literally from your perspective as the kid. And the stuff that starts coming up when you take that like wounded child streak out of you onto paper, it gets really nasty. So I'm not gonna lie, like the kinds of stuff you tell your mom in that letter, I'm like, I cannot believe I thought I was a good person. What is this that I just wrote? But it is extremely healing, and it is such a journey, because through the act of writing, your body is processing a lot of trauma. And it is finally able to release that trauma. And then essentially when you're done, when you feel complete with your letter to your mom, you burn it. You don't read it to her, you don't send it to her, God forbid. You burn it. And with, the fire carries all of that away. And by the way, you can do that whether you're, whether your mom is alive or not alive, it doesn't really matter. And it was an incredibly healing moment, and I released a lot. And so if anybody on this call feels like you want to do a practice, it's a really, really good practice. It will take a lot out of you, but your inner child, your wounded child, has a lot to tell to your mom and your dad. If you're, if you're willing to keep going on this healing journey, there could be a letter to dad as well. But yes, certainly, I feel like we all share the mother wound to some degree.
Thank you so much for sharing that. I've been on a similar path where I've written so many letters, what we call clearing conversations, to my mother, and it just never lands. So I love that you shared it from a wounded child perspective. I feel like that hits a little bit different. So thank you. I'm sure we all needed to hear that.
Because initially I started writing from the grown-up perspective, and I was like, I felt like I wasted an hour. I'm like, what did I just do with my life? Like, it makes no sense. I'm like, and it was like, my mom is just different and she's beautiful in her own way. And it's okay that she didn't love me because, she had other things. And then I'm like, okay, that's not how the baby in me feels. The baby in me is like, what the hell? I'm your daughter. What did you do? Right. And that only came through, I think, like session 3 when I sat down to write, and I'm like, I don't care. I'm just going to tell it how it is. Yeah.
So
Yeah, thank you for sharing that, for sure. I'm planning on using that practice. I think that's a huge part of my evolution is that piece. So thank you.
You told us a little bit about your next book. Is there anything that you can tell us in terms of like what we have to look forward to for the next, the second book and maybe even the third book?
Yeah, the second book is called The Rose Codes, the Book of the Goddess. So the first one is the Book of Initiations. The second one is the Book of the Goddess. The third one is the Book of Paths and Mysteries. The fourth one, and that's a big if, and like Spirit is really funny. They're like, the fourth book is called the Book of Wisdom, but we shall determine whether you can birth it or not. Because if you ain't wise by the time we want you to download it, it ain't gonna be you. I'm like, I get it. Thank you. I appreciate the challenge. So the Book of Wisdom may or may not happen from this human over here, but the other two are happening. So the Book of the Goddess is actually very interesting. There is the concept of the original goddess that I don't see a lot of people talk about. So essentially what I've been shown is this figure 8 symbol. And the top of the figure 8 is white, and the bottom of the figure 8 is black. And that's the feminine infinity. And the top of this feminine infinity is essentially what we would perceive as, the feminine face of Source. So essentially God, if she was a woman, right? A lot of people call her Sophia. That's not her only name, but it is the name that we're going with for that book. So half of the book is channeled from Sophia. And it's a lot of codes around the new race of humans, the 12 strands of DNA, solar upgrades, and it's very heavenly divine, is the best way to describe it. The bottom part of the 8 is if we were kind of to imagine the collective aspect of the goddess that actually walked the earth, that was incarnated here, that would be that aspect. It's almost like goddess embodied on planet Earth. The name of this goddess is Tiamat. Tiamat. And essentially it's translated, it means the dark mother or the primordial mother. And she is the mother of all matter. So essentially, she has created this universe as we know it. So when you know, Sophia, right, the divine, projected her energy downwards, the universe was created. But really, all of that energy that was projected down is this goddess embodied concept. And so the book, without going into too many complexities, is the story of this primordial goddess and the story of Sophia, and they're kind of like very intertwined together. Now, through their stories, because both are collective archetypes and both are collective energies, you dive into certain, call it goddesses, that are very top of mind. So there's a chapter on Athena, for instance. There is a chapter on Maat, the Egyptian goddess, and her laws, and how she was the counterpart to Thoth or Hermes. And so she brings forth her own Hermetic principles, because there used to exist a female version of the Hermetic principles, actually, and Maat was married to Thoth, and they wrote them together. So it's that type of information that's coming through. There is a lot of dragon wisdom, because Tiamat is also considered the original dragon. So it's beautiful, and it's really next level. So I'm super excited. I'm about 30% through it, though, to be fair, because if the first one took a lot of initiations, the second one is like, how do you raise your consciousness to be able to impart the wisdom of God, essentially, without truncating it to your own human understanding? And that's been an initiation after initiation for me, and like a lot of release and a lot of purging. And frankly, like, there is an ascesis also that I had to take. So I don't eat on Fridays now. I have liquid drinks only, and I've had to do that for over a year now to just prepare my body to download this level of information. So it comes with the territory. Like, if you're dealing with these kinds of energies, then spirit is going to ask you for certain sacrifices, call it. Yeah. So I'm in the process.
I'm excited, and that's interesting that you mentioned dragons, because dragons have been coming in really fierce for me over the last year. The wing activation that you did, the wings I saw were dragons, and I was like, I don't want this. What is this? It was so weird. And then I talked to Anna, because she went to the same activation, and she was like, that's so beautiful. I'm like, okay, I'm going to embrace it.
This used to be the dragon planet. You know this? Dragons were some of the original inhabitants of planet Earth. Dinosaur is a made-up name that was made up in the 19th century, specifically 1846. The word dinosaur did not exist prior. They were called dragons. So whichever they're finding right now, they're not finding dinosaurs. I hate to say it. They're finding the dragons. And ley lines, are you guys familiar with the concept of ley lines? They're dragon lines is what it is. So they, dragons build those originally. And a lot of crystals in the crystalline grid of planet Earth were actually transplants. Dragons literally planted those crystals into the Earth's crust when they were anchoring energies. Back in the day where Earth was actually all water, there was no land yet. So that's also, all of this information has been coming through this book. It was a dragon planet. Like, yeah, we're living on a dragon planet. So dragons are like really, really deeply rooted here. Dragons are also a matriarchy. There's one female matriarch at the top. Yeah.
So cool.
I have
I'm
been
geeking.
fascinated. I've been fascinated by dragons since I was a toddler. I used to have a dragon in my room to keep me safe at night. And this was back in the 1960s. It had been a long time. But I still have dragons all over my house. Yeah. And I find them beautiful and wise. And so I love this. I can't wait to read this book.
Yeah.
We're excited, Mariya. We can't wait.
Yeah.
I can't wait either. And Angela and Jesse, you might remember at Rose's retreat when we were told to dress as a goddess. I went to Big Sur and I bought a goddess necklace. It was a beautiful necklace, and I said it was Sophia.
Oh.
Like, yeah. And like, I didn't even know where that came from. that I said it was
Mm.
Sophia. And then I researched Sophia.
Mhm.
And then we
Um,
all read the Sophia code.
Yeah.
And then you sent me the Sophia information, and I got put on another initiation. I still got to
There you
unpack that, I
go.
think, Margie.
That's
And
right.
just
That's
to
right.
add to that, oh, go ahead. Go
Oh, I'm
ahead.
No,
good.
I was just was remembering the
Oh,
exchange. In
well,
fact, I told Angela, you're like a meme of Sophia.
yeah, to add to that, so I recently had an alignment by Carrie, one of our shamanic sisters, and she said dragons are really coming in so strong for you. And I was like, well, let me tell you, I got my dragon wings earlier this year, but I haven't used them because I feel so ashamed. And she's like, no, no, they really want to play with you. And she gave me this whole visualizations of how like this one dragon came in and was like all snuggled up near me. I was like, yeah, I felt that. She's like, but you don't believe. And so she did a core belief work on me to like you know, basically to lift the limiting belief that they're not real. And so this is even more confirmation. Thank you for talking about that, because I'm on this dragon path now and gonna figure out how to use these dragon wings.
Oh, goodness.
And I mean, I've had this little guy
Look
sitting
at
for like
that.
a year.
Love it.
Something's happening. Anyways, Mariya, you have so many amazing things that you offer to this world, including, you know, not just your books, but I've been to so many of your initiations. Can you tell us a little bit about what inspired those in your workshops, and what do you have going on, just so that my audience also knows about it?
Yeah. So I'm doing what's called sacred circles. Um, since December of last year. So I went on my own pilgrimage. Was it October of last year to Greece, specifically to Delphi? And I remember having many past lives in Greece, and specifically in the Delphi region. And as I was meditating there, and I spent many hours meditating there, right by the Temple of Athena, that is pretty much almost fully destroyed right now. But it was this remembrance, because Delphi was the birthplace of oracles, right? So seers, fortune tellers, etc. And we used to have a very strong, mostly feminine order in Delphi, and it was a circle. And part of, yes, there were fumes, and, you know, in Delphi, essentially, that area in Greece was originally where the goddess Gaia lived. So Gaia was embodied at one point, right? We call our planet Gaia, but her spirit was once embodied as a Greek Titan. And so essentially that area is fully sacred and very divine feminine. And I just had this remembrance of these circles that we had as women way back when. That was, I think, gosh, 5,000 years ago, maybe. It was a while ago. We started having them like a while ago. And then either way, the Delphi oracles are no longer, you know, they're no longer in existence. But I did a lot of clearing on the land and on the ley lines, and a lot of grid work at the time. And then I just felt I was ready to rebirth the circle. And at one point I used to host them with a lot of women, but I felt the circle was broken at one point for whatever reason. And I felt like I was ready to create it anew with a lot of light and a whole other perspective. And so it was very much a calling for me that I received in Greece, but I had a lot of clarity that I'm just meant to do this. Whatever, you know, whatever it is, I'm just meant to do this. And from the time that I decided that I want to do this, within a couple of weeks, I've scheduled my first 3 circles already. And those are, you know, there are Zoom gatherings. They very much feel like, I don't know, my community, my tribe is coming together. And they're really meant to be, so they're always focused on the topic. And they're always meant to be an an initiation into that topic. And so parts of it are just me channeling things or, you know, explaining things that I've channeled. And then really the most important part, I think, of the circle is the healing experience that we go through.
And I
again-
also noticed that you in your some of your meditations, you use some of these rituals from the rose codes, like the pyramid and the lilies. I was like, oh, I recognize that from the books. Or from the
Yes.
book. And I will say the first one was super powerful, like the clearing the witch wound. I was just so ashamed to talk about, not ashamed, but like scared to talk about my Reiki work and putting myself out there. And since doing that activation, I just don't care. I just put it all out there. So really
Yes.
powerful stuff. And
I'm
like I
so
said, I received
glad.
my dragon wings.
Look at you. Yes, those are
When was the
beautiful.
witch wound activation? Where was that? Do we know? What chapter?
Oh, no, that was just
no.
one of her workshops.
Yeah.
But in her meditation, she had us like there was a lot going on in the meditation, but at some point she had us put the pyramid that she talks about with the lilies at the bottom and the lotus flower at the top of your head.
Uh-huh.
It was super beautiful and powerful. So she uses elements of what's in the rose codes sometimes through her meditations for the activations or the workshops that she does online.
Cool. I actually did a witch wound thing last week, and that was my core belief work with Carrie.
Ah.
Oh, goodness.
Beautiful. And then Mariya, you also have a podcast and
Yes, I have a podcast. I have a YouTube channel. I have an Instagram. I have a TikTok. I have all of the stuff that people have these days.
all the things. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'll send those over to you guys if you guys are interested in continuing to follow Mariya. Mariya, thank you so much. I just want to close it out by sending you so much gratitude from the bottom of my heart. Even though a lot of this stuff is confronting and I get pissed off, it really is super healing and brings me to the next level each time I really dive into it and give myself some grace. So thank you for doing this work and sharing it with us, and also being so willing to come and talk to us. And yeah, from the bottom of my heart, thank you.
You're so welcome, and it's been a true pleasure to be in your space, share the space with you ladies, and I'm so thankful that you all are either reading or considering to read the Rose Codes.
Beautiful. Does anybody
Thank you very much. No,
any
just thank
last
you very much.
comments?
Yeah, this is special. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
And for the rest of us, I will send the next book topic out via email, and then our next meeting will be in July. Thank you all. I hope you have a beautiful week, and yeah, I'll talk to you all soon.
And thank you, Jessie,
Yes,
for
thank you,
hosting this.
Jessie.
Bye.
Bye.